Okay, Chapter 3, Getting the Office Ready, Haley, Idaho, 1952. I had my own snow shovel, and every time Dad would lift a shovelful out of the path, I would shovel it back in. "Making her summer, Dad," I would say. It would sound logic to my 4-year-old mind. Why make a single pathway when you should be getting rid of the whole bunch of it? Never mind that some of it happened to fall back into the path Dad was making, necessary collateral damage. The world at 5:30 in the morning, after a fresh snowfall, is full of wonder and adventure to a busy child. "We need to get this done before OU comes to the office, right, Dad?" "That's right." They tell me that when I was a baby, my grandfather would poke at me and say, "Oh, you." And the name stuck. But most people just called him Doc because that's who he was, a doctor. His office was in the same building where we lived and where Dad worked in his shop on Main Street, and I would help Dad shovel out the walks and driveways when it snowed. OU's real name was Robert Henry Harrison Thornton Hicks John Brown Wright. At least that's what he told me it was. I had a sneaking suspicion even then it was just Robert Henry Wright. "We got to get things ready for him, right, Dad?" "That's right." The town still slept. There were no sounds except the drone of road graders crisscrossing the streets, piling up 10 and 20-foot banks of unspoiled clumps of white, and that made me and Dad special, the two most important people in the world. By the time the sun was up and OU came down the hill in his 51 Studebaker riding the clutch with a half-idle roar, we had cleared the paths to the building, front and side, parking lots and sidewalks, and the hopper was filled with coal, and the furnace stoked and the office warm. We'd done our job. Dad shook his head as OU slowly roared to a stop. "Your granddaddy burns out a clutch a month, but you can't tell him anything." "Nope, Dad, you can't tell him anything." The old McCormick Bank building still had the stenciled name painted on it, the McCormick Bank. OU owned it now. The front half was his office. The middle was the workshop where Dad and Mom made things out of wood and sold them to people who came to Sun Valley. And the back half of the building was storage OU rented out. Underneath it, supposedly, was a tunnel that ran to the alley where they used to bring the gold shipments into the bank. I never was allowed to go there. The workshop must have been a famous place because Dad's Creations, Beaver Cut was the name he and Mom had for them, a trademark for glass smooth swirls of wood they'd find in the riverbanks and fashion into bowls, ashtrays, cigarette lighters, vases, were featured in magazines that sold in newsstands in places as far away as New York and San Francisco. We lived upstairs, the apartment we called it. I did my best during the day to run wild. Well, at least I tried not to run wild while OU had patience, but it was a hopeless venture. I ran wild anyway. But a certain amount of thumping, it was just something that had to be accepted. Sometimes I would smash my face against the heat register and peer down at the astonished people below. When the patients finally left, it was my turn. I'd trot on down the stairs, thump, 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 and a whole new adventure would begin. OU would be sitting at his roll-top desk reading the Twin Falls Times-News or the Boise Statesman. A black desktop telephone was always within reach. A framed photograph of a baby in a crib was on the left-hand side in the same spot every day, in a place all by itself with nothing cluttered around it, a picture of me, I had always assumed. OU would show me my bones through the fluoroscope and let me listen to my heart. He'd show me a jar, this big, huge jar of formaldehyde with a tapeworm that he'd taken out of Mrs. Leopold. And he let me feel the weight of a jar of mercury. It was just a jar, but it seemed like it weighed a ton. Then he'd read the newspaper out loud and talk about the day's events, just like I was one of his patients, a regular person. Well, what do you know? Old Jersey Joe got himself beat. Rocky Marciano is the new heavyweight champion now. Who'd have ever thought it? Says here someone invented a heart-lung machine. You know what that means? That means we can operate on human hearts now. Makes you wonder what's next. I remember him talking about a place called Vietnam. I remember him talking about it because he told me it was close to a country where Siamese cats come from. We had 2 Siamese cats, a little baby and Monkey Puss. They're having a civil war over there, he said. There's the North and the South, like in Korea. Doesn't make much sense to me, us sending guns over to a place all the way on the other side of the world, but if it helps fight communism, I guess it's okay. I always knew our visit had come to an end when he'd read the funnies. What do you say we see what Major Hoopola's up to? Then, that'll be $3. $3 was the price of an office call. Give it to my bill, would be my stock answer. It was hard for me to imagine OU as anything but powerful and blessed with wisdom, or that there was ever a time when he doubted his own abilities. I didn't know about his first patient, the little black girl's mother, the placenta previa case back in '06. '06 is the way he would call it, right after he graduated from medical school. I didn't learn that story until I was an adult, when I overheard my wife having a conversation with Nana. Girl talk while Wendy was doing Nana's hair. They were in the bathroom. I just happened to be in the bedroom, one door down, and could hear clearly everything that was being said. I was particularly alert because Nana was giving her advice on how to handle men, about how women are stronger than they realize in helping to shape their husbands' careers and destinies. You want to know how he proposed to me? Nana said, in a sudden burst of amusement. He wrote me from St. Louis right after he graduated and said, I've met a girl back here, and unless you marry me right now, I'm going to stay here in St. Louis and marry her. Why, I had half a mind to tell him no, she said. I couldn't believe she was laughing about it. Maybe because she didn't believe it. I didn't believe it either. I believed it even less after reading his love letters to her. There was no girl in St. Louis. There never had been. There never had been anyone but her. The threat to marry another woman was nothing more than a wacky marriage proposal. And it was one that worked. Good thing you didn't say no, I whispered to myself. And then came the story of the first patient, one of the times when she was the powerful one.